Viva la Mexico! We are back with the balance breakdown for the UFC Mexico City card. We're going to break down the card from top to tail. Harry Powell is here as always to take us through. A little chit chat that we were having before. A little, somewhat of a strange card. A lot of, from the main event to stuff that happened in the co-main event to, I think the overall inability of certain fighters to be able to deal with the high altitude. It's just different gravy. And I think overall that made these fights somewhat unnatural, I would want to say, because I don't know, you can spend your time in your altitude chents and you can do this and you can do that, but I think it's just different gravy from what we've seen before in Mexico City cards. Obviously, the Utah card is at high altitude. We see Colorado cards at high altitude, but it was very, very clear here from the very early stages of the night that the card was affected a little bit by the high altitude. But look at all the fighters sign up. They knew what they were in for. It kind of made it interesting in some ways, but I don't know. I don't particularly enjoy watching fighters gas out more easily than they should, and it kind of does take away from the overall fight. You had said it was a strange card as well, Harry. For what reason do you kind of label it? I kind of put it down a little bit to the altitude in some regards. The crowd was
amazing.
Yeah, it was like, for anybody that is still up on the Apex cards, like, you go from what we witnessed last weekend to what we witnessed this weekend, and it's chalk and cheese now at this stage. And it's very tough to watch the undercard fights and the prelims when there's not that much jeopardy. But when you got the backing of a crowd, Harry, it's just phenomenal. It can make a really shite card really exciting. And you kind of get into the atmosphere of the crowd as well. Now, the crowd really got excited. They were beating the shit out of each other a lot of times as well. But that being said, they definitely played the part in the excitement factor of this one, didn't they?
Yeah, so the reason why I thought that this was a weird card was because I felt as though the story arc for me was just really, really poor decision making in a lot of these fights. And that was some of the reasons as to why some of these fights were closer than maybe they should have been. I thought we had some odd judging calls. I thought that we had some fights that, yes, definitely were affected by the altitude, but I also think that we had some fights where we were looking at fighters who, how do I put this politically? We were looking at fighters that maybe when they look back at their performances are not going to be impressed with the way that they produced on the night. I think if we just very quickly, I'll just name some names. I think the first one is Yair Rodriguez. I think Yair Rodriguez is going to look back at his performance and rue some of the mistakes that he made. I think when we go through and have a conversation about Francisco Prado, I think that first round really showed him where his weaknesses are and his strengths. I think Chris Duncan has a problem. I think Cristian Quinonez is my A1. I am so angry at Cristian Quinonez. I think, the fact that Daniel Lacerda gets caught in a close guard triangle, he should be banned forever.
You kind of called that though, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, you know that.
Puelles, again, horrendous fight IQ. And then, just I think something that happens too, and this will be the final on the weirdness bit, is when a fight card starts, especially in a fight town like Mexico, when it starts with a first minute knee injury, the card is just set up to be weird. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like when you start a fight card in that Mexican crowd, in the belly of the arena, fans are in there from the very first, and the first thing they see is not the bloodlust that they want. It's not this crazy back and forth war. It's a fella, unfortunately, blowing his knee out like that. It just sets the tone, I think,
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And, talking about talking about underperformers, Harry, I'm surprised you didn't mention it. And let's talk about it straight away. The main event. Brandon Royval takes home a split decision win over Brandon Moreno. And I have to say, the biggest question I haven't come out of this fight is what the hell was going on with Brandon Moreno here? What the hell was going on with him? Like, he didn't look at all what the level that we've seen him produce in his previous fights. I mean, it kind of looked like he felt he had this fight in the bag from the very start, and he really didn't. And it turned into such a closer fight than what it should have been based off previous performances. Maybe I'll just ask you that question. What do you think the hell was going on with Brandon Moreno in this fight?
So when I was watching that fight, right, I thought to myself, maybe I need to recalibrate what I see, mean, and feel when I talk about elite fighters. Because I wonder, and this is just a thought, maybe this is a speaker's corner, but what my thought was is there's elite fighters where you just get the same regardless of the opponent. And then there are some fighters who just have elite fights against other competition and specific styles. And I wonder whether Brandon Moreno, in those very 4 years or whatever it fucking was that we had with the trilogy with Davison Figueiredo, I wonder whether in those performances we saw an elite level Brandon Moreno, and we are not going to be able to see a similar level version against other people. Because I completely agree with you. Watching Moreno, there was no crisp jab. There was very, very few well thought out, well set up straight punches, at least in that first round. It was just mad everywhere, didn't seem to find his rhythm, massive looping left hooks, just such stark contrast into the Brandon Moreno that we have been witnessing over the last sort of 3 to even 4 years. You know, I was perplexed for sure.
This might sound absolutely outrageous, right? And you can tell me if it is outrageous.
Sure.
But some part of me thinks that Brandon Moreno and what's going on in his mind, maybe subconsciously in this fight, is thinking to himself, do I really want to stay cutting down to 125 anymore and facing off against these guys? Do I really want to put myself into a position here? Now, I know this is outrageous, but these are the thoughts that sometimes go through my head. Like, does he really want to go through the motions and take on a Pantoja and get to the top of the heap at 125 again? Or does he just want to maybe just come in at the 135 weight class, have a couple of fun fights up there? It didn't seem that he had the hunger and the desire to get this fight done for him, because I think if we do see the level of capabilities that he is at and the level of technical ability that he has showcased in previous fights, that I think this was a very winnable fight for him, to be honest. But he just didn't seem to get going at all in this fight. Now, pure speculation on my behalf, but I think the answer to that question might be answered when the time his next fight is announced, whether it is at 125 or whether it's at 135. But what's your thoughts on that? Am I a bit nuts for thinking that? I am a little bit. I can probably answer that a little bit, but you can kind of see where I'm coming from, though.
So I think you are a little wild. However, I don't disagree that. Okay, let's split this out. Do I think that Brandon Moreno should, could, or will move up? Possibly. Would I like to see him move up? Yeah, kind of. Because he's kind of in this weird position where he's kind of fought everyone in that division. And at least the people he hasn't fought are either the up and ups, like a Muhammad Makayev or whatever else, somebody that's really, really streaking through that division, or it's somebody like an Alex Perez type. I know he's fought Alex Perez, but you know what I mean, right? Like it's one of those types of fights where we don't learn anything necessarily, or those fighters are going to have to put together quite a run in order to justify that sort of name of Brandon Moreno. And in the same vein, Do we want to see Moreno and Pantoja again? I don't think we necessarily do. Do we want to see a third with Royval?
No.
I'm not necessarily sure we do. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's in that weird, he's kind of in that Alexander Volkanovski spot where he's either lost to the best of the best, fought the best of the best, and kind of has nowhere really to go right now. And so is 135 a good place for him? Possibly. But
yeah. And I'm not necessarily saying that like he went out there and threw the fight or anything like that. But I'm looking at motivational factors and mental fortitude to get the job done in this fight. Okay, let's go back through, right? Since 2020, the November 2020, this is Brandon Moreno's list of opponents. Brandon Royval, Davison Figueiredo, Davison Figueiredo, Davison Figueiredo, Kai Kara France, Davison Figueiredo, Alejandro Pantoja, and Brandon Royval again.
Yeah.
That's a lot of repetitive, and it's very hard to kind of stay getting up for these fighters that you're on. Like, the importance of fresh challenges kind of gives you that little bit of extra motivation. And I think when you're at a level of like a Brandon Moreno, Royval, or anyone who's fighting in the top of the division in any kind of weight class, really, you have to be really finding these minuscule methods of motivation to kind of get an extra bit of an edge, because, you know, obviously you have the motivation to becoming a champion, you have a motivation to keep your title, but when I feel that sometimes when you're facing the same task over and over again, it kind of feels kind of competitive and Groundhog Day, and that you can lose a little bit of an edge when it comes to that. And I think I'm wondering, has that happened with Brandon Moreno here? But at the same time, in the same breath, we've got to give Brandon Royval the credit where credit is due as well, for going out there and producing the level of performance that he did, and overall the output that he showcased at high altitude. I mean, we talked about high altitude and how it affect fighters. It didn't affect Brandon Royval in the slightest, with the fact that how he grew into the fight, and his output on strikes as well was absolutely colossal for a fight that was being held at very, very high altitude, and it was very, very impressive as well. The fight itself, Harry, what did you kind of see? What went right and what went wrong for both of these fighters? I mean, how did you score the fight, first of all? On first watch, I have scored this fight 48-47 to Brandon Moreno. Round one is a super close fight.
Yep.
I have not had the chance to go back and look at it, and I do apologize for that, but we were talking about 14 straight hours of MMA on Saturday, recording the Owl Triangle on Sunday. I needed a little bit of downtime from MMA, so I didn't get the chance to kind of watch it today when I was working. So I'd like to give maybe a better opinion, but on the night, it was a very close round one. I'm very curious to see how you scored the fight.
I don't know is the answer.
That's
because like you, I scored it differently the first time to how I scored it the second time. I scored it 48-47 to Brandon Royval the first time. Second watch, I scored it 48-47 to Brandon Moreno.
Right. Interesting.
I think that first and that third round are the swing rounds for me.
Yes.
I must say it was very, 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 very cool to see your name again pop up on the old Twitter there. It seems like you and Shawnee are now the European representatives. Fair play to you. The first round, neither of them really threw a huge amount. It felt like a bit of a feeling out round. I honestly think partly this to me is where the altitude came in, is both of them almost said to each other, lads, we've got 25 minutes here. Let's not go absolutely fucking bananas out of the gate, because if both of us are fucked, this isn't going to be good for anyone, right? Round two, just pulling up my notes, a very, very good start to round two for Brandon Moreno. He cracks Brandon Royval with two really good left hooks. Royval is landing, but he is landing with less power than those two left hooks. And so the sort of first 2 minutes I gave to Moreno. Now, hear me out. Obviously, you don't score rounds in pieces, but
yeah.
up to the first 2 minutes, I had the round for Moreno. Moreno then started looking for a single leg, and I thought that was really interesting. One, it was the first bit of grappling that we'd seen, and also I thought it was an interesting move tactically to be like, oh, we can also do some grappling here. There was then some really nice lands from Moreno throughout the round, but I wrote, isn't he a bit wild today? Question mark. I put, this isn't vintage Moreno at all. Moreno does get the fight down with a lovely single leg. Royval inverts, looks for a triangle. There's nothing there. There's a go-go platter attempt at some point, and then a bit of a reset. So I scored round 2. There are only sort of 2 rounds that I score completely blowout. Definitely, I would hedge my bets on those. The first one is round 2 for Brandon Moreno. Then round 3, big leg kick from Royval to start. Then Moreno gets another takedown, gets on a back body lock. Big high kicks from Royval, low kicks. This is a better round for him, is what I said between the first sort of 2 minutes. Then left hooks start working for Moreno. Super intelligent for Moreno to recognize where the spinning elbows are coming in the clinch and in the back body locks. I then wrote, this is a fucking close round. And I think it is a close round. We then go into round 4. I erred on the night towards Brandon Moreno. Brandon Royval here. There was a fast start from Moreno with 2 clean hands. However, when Moreno failed the first takedown and almost gets mounted, that changes the fight. Royval manages to get Moreno down, lands some shots, only short shots, but they landed regardless. And then round 5, I had that for Brandon Royval throughout that. So I know that doesn't answer the question, but what I saw happening for both is Royval started by trying to land his straight shots, trying to land shots to the body. And I thought his body work was really actually very, very nice and probably really, really pivotal into why the 4th and 5th were rounds that I scored towards him. I thought Moreno was just odd. Like we've already talked about, with the big looping left hooks. I thought he could have gone to the grappling a little bit earlier. I was very shocked at the lack of control in the grappling. Now we know that Royval
I have a point about that, if you don't mind me interrupting, Harry, for a second, right? I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about why Moreno wasn't as effective as what we've seen in previous fights. Now, a lot of success in Brandon Moreno's previous fights comes off of very opportunistic positions based off scrambles, right? And in a lot of these occasions, we've seen Brandon Moreno to be the better scrambler of both of these fighters. But a lot of credit that we've given to Brandon Royval in recent fights, and especially coming in that Pantoja fight as well, as Pantoja had a lot of difficulty in those scramble positions against Royval, where Royval is just one of these excellent fucking scramblers. I asked him that question down in December. It's like, the scramble is a very, very important position, I feel, in modern mixed martial arts, where you can make one small move wrong and you open yourself up to punches, whether you separate and stuff like that, or you open yourself up to a body lock. And it appeared that Moreno was trying to do this and trying to get to the back of Royval, but Royval was simply too good to allow him to do that in this fight. And then I think that took an awful lot away from Brandon Moreno's kind of game and style, and maybe his game plan coming in here, where it was like he had to develop all of his attack on the feet and not base it around clinch exchanges, creating scrambles, and then creating opportunities off those scrambles. You remember in the Davison Figueiredo fights that he was having massive success coming out of the scrambles and coming out of those clinch exchanges, but he just didn't seem to have the confidence, or Brandon Royval kind of caused the inability for him to be able to do that in this fight. And it seemed at a stage of this fight, he seemed a little bit lost, where he did just rely on those big shots and those like winging power punches, and he kind of panicked a little bit and he stopped working behind his jab a little bit. And I think we have to give a lot of credit to Brandon Royval for creating that kind of chaos in Brandon Moreno's world as well. Did you kind of pick up a little bit off that when you were watching the fight?
So I think you've just encapsulated really beautifully what I was thinking. I didn't pay as much credence to the failing of the scrambles, because when I looked at him on the feet, I was like, there's no angles here. There's no footwork here. We're just resetting and then diving in with big left hooks, essentially. Like that's not really Brandon Moreno. And then when I think about it, that is Brandon Moreno. But that was Brandon Moreno in the Ultimate Fighter the first time. It was the unpolished, unvarnished, sort of heralded, molded version of Brandon Royval. And now that you mentioned the panic and the this and the that, one of the things that you and I talk about all the time is when a fighter in the fights are stripped back to the bare bones of who they are, they show us who they are. And then training goes out the window and this and that goes out the window. And what we're left with is the soul of a fighter. And the soul of Brandon Moreno is a scrapper, right? And so what we saw, and I think what actually won him some of those rounds and made some of those rounds competitive was that he is willing to, the last 15 seconds of round 5, he's willing to just dip his head and throw mad shots and massive shots and do his best to separate his opponent from their consciousness. And I think you're absolutely right that what we saw was the onset of some panic, the onset of a game plan not working for Brandon Moreno. And then we saw the results of those things. I think that's a very, very, very astute observation.
Yeah, and look at your scoring of the fight, my scoring of the fight. The 3 judges on tap for the night. Mike Bell scored the fight 48-47 to Royval. Jonjiro Camacho 49-46. Create a little bit of an out there card for me, to be honest. Although, an arguably understandable one as well with close rounds. And Chris Lee 48-47 Royval as well. So split decision. The cards, our opinions on the card show that it was just a super close fight.
It was
a really, really, really close fight. And you know what? Not too much controversy online about it after either, which was a little bit of breath of fresh air too. Hopefully, some of the craziness has kind of subsided for a little bit, but an understanding between a close fight and a robbery is a big thing in the world of mixed martial arts, and not everybody can kind of grasp that. But look, I scored the fight for Moreno, but I could not argue for 1 second about giving that fight to Royval, the way it kind of played out and the way I super impressed how he didn't start off that good, because I think I scored round 1 for Moreno, round 2 for Moreno, and like I had round 3 is a really close fight, which close round, which I gave to Royval. Round 4, Royval, and then it came down to round 5 for me, which I gave to Moreno. And but it's a fight again. I mean, this was probably the 30th fight that I had watched all day on a Saturday, so I don't know whether my eyes wouldn't have been as dependable as they normally are, but that's kind of my live assessment, and I'd like to watch back that fight again soon. Any final thoughts on the fight itself, Harry? And look, we talked a little bit maybe about what's next for Moreno. What do you want to see next for both these guys? And please share your final thoughts on this one before we move on.
At the end of the day, it was a close fight, right? Should it have been a close fight? Maybe not, but it was a close fight. And so we have to respect that. I think 49-46, I also agree, is a bit of a wild one. But at the end of the day, neither of us were there. We've talked all the time about angles that the judges sit at and how difficult that can make judging some of these fights sometimes. And look, these guys are professionals. There were 3 good judges out there on that night. And so, I will absolutely take what they say, over what I have to say, frankly. In terms of what's next for both of them, Moreno, as I say, is in this sort of sticky spot. And it kind of sucks in a way that if he does have to go up, like that's a 6 months body transformation, or it's a whatever to make sure he's in a position where he's not just going to get massively outsized at 135. I also think at 135, his style is interesting in that division, but also could cause him some huge problems in that division. In terms of Brandon Royval, again, he's in a tough situation. What do you do with Brandon Royval?
I think the flyweight division as a whole now is in a very, very difficult situation given what's happened over the last number of years. And we're going to be talking on the Severe Setup about a flyweight fight that's going down this weekend between Mohamed Mohayev and Alex Perez, which has a real big relevance on the flyweight division. If you ask me, if they're looking for a little bit of freshness at the top of the rankings there. We look at Royval, fair play to him. He took this fight on short notice. He got the win. On a normal circumstances, I'd be saying reward him with a title shot, but we've just seen that in December. I think he kind of has a cases of the Max Holloways here, where he's going to probably have to play gatekeeper for maybe another fight or two before he gets that title shot again. Or maybe best case scenario for him is one of the two, and Makayev or Perez comes out and beats Pantoja if that fight does go down. But I'm a big proponent of the flyweight division. I have been for many years, but we're kind of at a stale section of the flyweight division right now. We need this little bit of freshness, but in order to get that freshness, we need one of these up and coming fighters to kind of take the bull by the horns and get the win here. There's two things I wanted to say. Brandon Moreno was called out by Henry Cejudo for UFC Noche later on this year at 135 pounds, which kind of sparked the thought for me is, will he move up there? Will he take a break from 125? And actually, Brandon Royval came out today and said that he had a suspected MCL tear in his knee in the first round of that fight as well, which makes his performance absolutely phenomenal in my eyes, if that is actually the case. And now he does say suspected, so obviously that has not been diagnosed yet, but per his Facebook, from public enemy number one to number one contender, came off the couch for a short notice fight against the former champion in his hometown, most likely tore my MCL in the first minute of the fight. He'd hate it or love it, but the underdog is on top. So fair play to him. Like, fighters do self-diagnose sometimes, but you do have a tendency to know when you do have something seriously wrong with your knee when something does go. So I think you can attest to that as well, Harry. You have your own problems too. So those little tidbits kind of make that win a little bit better. Plus the call out of Brandon Moreno by Henry Cejudo. But it's all about what King Powell wants next. And that's what we go by here on the Balance Breakdown. So what would you like to see next for both of these guys? And I'll throw in a little snippet as well. What would you like to see for the flyweight division as well?
So I would have no problem with Brandon Royval fighting the winner of Alex Perez versus Mohamed Makayev. And I say that because I'm not necessarily sure that if Makayev beats Alex Perez, that means a title shot. In the same vein, I'd have no problem with Makayev getting a title shot. He's had many, many fights in the flyweight division now, but it feels like going from Alex Perez to going to Alexander Pantoja is a massive step up, right? Big, big, big old step up. And so there's an element with me that says, well, we have lots and lots of time, as we've talked about ad nauseum. We have lots and lots and lots of time. I also wouldn't mind with Brandon Royval if they're going to do the Mohamed Makayev versus Alexander Pantoja should he win. If Steve Erceg gets through Matt Schnell, let's see Steve Erceg versus Brandon Royval. As you said, we need to get flyweight moving again. We need to have contenders pushing through and coming back around and building it. And Steve Erceg and Mohamed Makayev certainly seem like two names that are going to be in and around that division for a long, long time. And so let's give them their opportunity to shine, right? They're both on similar timelines to everyone on this card, right? If Makayev gets through Perez, great. Then we have, if you want to do the Pantoja thing, great. If not, then Brandon Royval has obviously just fought, knee surgery or knee problems aside. And then we have Alex Perez and we have Steve Erceg also fighting on a very similar timeline. And so I think mix those guys in and around each other, and I think we've got a heady cocktail. In terms of Brandon Moreno, frankly, he should do what he wants now, right? I feel like he's earned that, but I really, really like the call out of Henry Cejudo. I thought Henry Cejudo looked very, very, very good. Certainly, his initial assessment of if I don't win against Marab and I'll retire, I thought his performances was far, far, far better than the need to immediately retire. But yeah, I'm down for a bit of Brandon Moreno at 135 with Henry Cejudo. I'd have no problem with that whatsoever.
Let's do it in the Spear in September. Let's go, champ. I love that. And we shall move on to the co-main event. We said we're going to do an hour on this card. We've gone 30 minutes on the main event, but that's what happens sometimes when we get into it. Yair Rodriguez versus Brian Ortega, 145-pound division. Almost 2 fights in the space of 1 fight here, Harry. An absolute barn burner of a performance in round 1 from Yair Rodriguez, but 1 minute into round 2 seemed to gas out, and Brian Ortega got himself back into this. A lot of talk was of what happened before this fight even started, and that was Brian Ortega apparently so rolling his ankle. He appeared to roll his ankle at the start of the fight. Not what you want to be dealing with before you head in there for a 5-round co-main event. Shout out to the 5-round co-main event here, a great choice too. But bad decisions. You said it at the start of this podcast from Yair Rodriguez, and I would probably like to highlight the first major one, and that was after him hurting Brian Ortega multiple times in round 1. His choice to follow Brian Ortega, who's known for his excellent ground game, who's known for his excellent guard, kind of allowed him to recover in that fight. And I say this as Harry has his head in his hands, shaking his head in disbelief. And when you're watching fights, you absolutely hate seeing this level of fight IQ, don't you, Harry?
I really do. Yeah, I really, really, really do. I mean, look, if you are Yair Rodriguez and you drop Brian Ortega for the second time, and let's be honest, it probably was a rolled ankle. The first time Yair drops Brian, it's a lovely right hand. The second time he drops him, it was almost like Brian fell over his own feet, right? It didn't really seem like there was anything too much that Yair Rodriguez did to push him over, and yet Yair Rodriguez is like, yeah, let me go and follow down into this Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Really, really, really good guard. Let me just follow down there and let him wrap me up in close guard for 3 minutes. Like, what the fuck are we doing? You know? And even in, I think there was a moment in the second where Brian shot in for a takedown, got a single leg, and Yair Rodriguez tried to hip throw him. And I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, what are we just defend the single leg for fuck's sake? Like, what are you? You're just a moron. Like, you've hurt this fella really, really badly. His face is a fucking mess in the first 3 minutes. And your thought is, I follow him down to the ground. Like, you turn to the ref and you're like, get him on his feet. Grand. No stress. Get him on his feet. I'm having him there. That's where your success is. Just don't be a fucking idiot. And I mean,
there's not, and like why we get so passionate about that, and I feel how you're feeling as well. It's that it's so frustrating to look at, because what happens? Okay, you allow Brian Ortega to his feet, and you likely get off some more strikes. You could drop him again, and there's nothing saying that the referee wouldn't come in after the third time he's seen Brian Ortega getting dropped on the floor. We've seen that the referee would kind of step in there on some occasions to kind of stop that fight. But what you're not going to do is put yourself into his world. And sometimes I just think that that's the chip that Yair Rodriguez has always had on his shoulder that's cost him in some of these fights, where he's wanting to go down there. And, I think he would have, and as he should, take great pride in, getting into the guard of Brian Ortega, raining down punches and finishing him in what we perceive as Brian Ortega's dangerous guard. But at the end of the day, you need to leave the pride and the ego at the door here, and you need to fight smart. And he didn't simply do that, and it cost him. And we've seen how much it cost him in the early stages of round 2, where, even in the early stages of round 1, where he was swept, Harry. He went into round 2, he looked tired, he looked weary. And it was for me, the writing was on the wall, and I was assured that Brian Ortega was going to get a win when he secured that second takedown secured the takedown in the second round, got Yair down. And it's just the same old thing that we've been seeing from Yair. He has an ability to survive off his back, but an inability to get back up to his feet. And that is his kryptonite. And I just really strange performance here from Yair, and a hugely missed opportunity with what could have been on the plate for him as well in this fight. Talk to me about what you've seen. Maybe if you wanted to break down round 1 a little bit more, maybe coming into round 2, what the dominance that Brian Ortega showed. Talk about a guy who knows where he's going to be dominant and didn't mess around too much. That's Brian Ortega, who got this fight down, who dominated on top in the second round, which led to the finish in round 3 as well. An excellent arm triangle choke, which
wasn't an arm triangle.
Oh, head and arm?
Nope.
Okay, well, break down round 2 and break down the.
So the thing that we saw, right? The thing that we saw the most from Brian Ortega is, as usual, in his first round, he takes fucking loads of damage and he finds his way to survive it, right? That's the Brian Ortega MO. If he doesn't get smashed up in round 1, we're not in a Brian Ortega fight. In round 2, he wasted absolutely no time in running over to the side of the cage, grabbing Yair Rodriguez and putting him on the floor. What does Yair Rodriguez do? The other thing that I hate, and he jumps the fucking guillotine. I mean, what are we like? Honestly, I wanted to punch myself through my own screen at that point. Like, just horrendous stuff altogether, right? Absolutely. I was talking to Ian just offline there about on Saturday evening, I went to an amateur MMA show. There were 15 fights. I saw one fight of 15. One lad was 16, one lad was 19, and then the 16-year-old lad jumped to gilly, lost the fight, right? It just doesn't fucking work anymore, right? And I mean, I just want to smash myself against a fucking wall. Anyway, he jumps to gilly. Brian Ortega says, thank you so much, because now I can just sit on top of you and rest for a bit. When Brian decided to pull himself out of the guillotine, all he did was track Yair's hips. Yair wanted to play close guard. Brian said, yep, no problem whatsoever. Brian was peeling at wrists, landing nice elbows. Brian was posturing. Brian was landing lovely, lovely shots from the top, landed some ground and pound to the body. Just overall, kept Yair exactly where he wanted him to, rode the hips, made sure that he was square at all times, and just landed a ton of damage. Fair play. Yair looked for some elbows from the bottom, looked to take Brian Ortega underneath the armpit and try and get back up, but just didn't do anything necessarily to get himself back up. Didn't push himself to the cage, didn't get feet to hips, didn't get hands to biceps, didn't get hands to wrists, didn't do anything that you are taught. As we've talked about ad nauseum, if somebody that's not Brian Ortega locks a close guard in MMA, they should stop the fight. It's done. Forget about it. It just doesn't exist. And even Edgar Chairez, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, we get to the third round and Brian Ortega hits an absolutely gorgeous reverse broomstick immediately into mount. And you know from there, we're done here. But the actual technical details of how Brian Ortega got to even the head and arm triangle, what looked like a head and arm triangle setup, was very, very, very cool. So he's in mount, he's bearing his weight towards the right-hand side of Yair Rodriguez to make him feel like he's working on isolating that right arm. He lands a really nice left elbow to Yair Rodriguez's head, and we saw what he actually wanted to do the second time he threw it. As he was working for his underhook, Yair was doing a good job at trying to peel his own right elbow down towards the mat. Brian went from a wrist grip and elbowed Yair's right arm into place. That's the first time I've seen someone do that and do it successfully. So that was a super, super, super cool transition to see Brian Ortega use elbows, very similar to how Nate Diaz used the left hook to get underneath Conor's chin. It was very similar where Brian was using strikes to set up the grappling that he wanted. And that was really, 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 really cool. Anyway, the finish goes down as a head and arm triangle. It's not a head and arm triangle. If you notice that conventionally with a head and arm triangle, you're locking up a grip where bicep is connected to carotid artery. We're then sinking shoulder weight down through the esophagus and we're pushing ahead through the other carotid artery in order to get an actual strangle type mechanic. What Brian was doing is a modified Ezekiel. Craig Jones has talked about this ad nauseum, and it's a reaction that happens when you're looking for the head and arm triangle and your partner starts to show you his back, right? So he starts to sit towards the way the choke is coming in order to be able to bring his own arm back underneath the head of Brian Ortega and start to escape the head and arm. Actually, what Brian Ortega did is he starts to sit the corner. You see him sit to his hips, and the arm triangle grip stays where it is, and he locks a figure four, almost a rear naked, with his left arm over his right hand and uses the back of the palm to push Yair Rodriguez's head and neck into essentially what's an Ezekiel grip. And so as he sits his hips to it, Yair's head is contorted inside a modified Ezekiel. It's like a mix between Ezekiel and a Das. And then obviously we see him tap vigorously, and Brian Ortega gets pushed off by Mark Goddard and the whole thing. But it is
excellent breakdown. Can I ask one last question about that position? So in your standard head and arm choke, right, or arm triangle, right, you're using that different grip, but you're also moving that counterclockwise direction to kind of seal the grip and seal the kind of pinch on the choke. What you mentioned downward hip pressure there. Are you moving your hips towards the head right there in that position to kind of sync it up a little bit more? Or like normally in a standard, you're taught to kind of drive your hips down into the mat for those kind of chokes. But in this case, with the different grip, you're actually driving your hips up towards the head and shoulders, and neck area.
Yeah, so basically what you're doing is you want to get Yair sat in your lap effectively.
Yeah.
And when you have Yair sat in your lap, you have sat his spine at such a way that you're dragging him into your hips as you are exposing your own hips to the choke. Yeah. It's 100%. Fucking not nice at all.
Yeah, that's some high level stuff right there, and an excellent break. A high level breakdown of a high level sub there from Brian Ortega. Look, it opens up lots of avenues for Ortega. Has been through the run of the mill over the last number of years. I don't think a fight with Ilia Topuria next is the way to go for Brian Ortega. Do not think that goes well for him. Obviously, Yair, they had the beef, they had the drama over and back. That's completely out the door for Yair Rodriguez now. A massive kind of, we want to talk about fumble in the bag. That was big time fumble in the bag for Yair Rodriguez. But what can you do? What do you want to see next for both of these guys?
Yair Rodriguez, I genuinely don't know. I genuinely don't know. Do you do Movsarevloyev? I don't know that you do. I think you probably put Movsarevloyev into the title picture. Can we see Yair Rodriguez versus Arnold Allen? I think that's a fun fight. For Brian Ortega, I just don't know. It's the same thing for Brian Ortega. I don't want to see Max Holloway if he comes back down after the BMF title. I don't necessarily want to see Brian go in and fight Ilia Topuria. I don't want to see Brian fighting a Josh Emmett. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing Brian Ortega, and this won't happen, but just for the styles, I wouldn't mind Brian Ortega versus Bryce Mitchell.
Yeah. Brian Ortega, Bryce Mitchell. I'd even go as far as say Movsar Evelev versus Brian Ortega as your maybe number one contender fight as well. If they're going to do Ilia versus Volkanovski now, well, I mean, this UFC Notcha event really took a big hit there. I'd imagine they were probably looking at Ilia versus Yair for that event. Maybe they're looking at probably Brandon Moreno in a good prominent position in that card, maybe fighting for a title too. But that's all gone out the window, and it'll be interesting to see what does happen and what is next for Yair and for Brian Ortega in the featherweight division. We move on to the 155-pound division, and we have Daniel Zellhuber, who picked up a win over Francisco Prado. And you mentioned Prado made some big errors here, I would imagine it's the over-reliance on his overhand shots against a guy who's long and rangy and fights very long and rangy and can kind of eat you apart if you're coming in with long, wide, looping shots. And that's exactly what Daniel Zellhuber did. Utilized the jab, utilized the front kick, and just kept this fight at a distance and at a pace that suited him perfectly. And it was a good performance from Zellhuber, and mixed with a bad performance, was what you said from Francisco Prado. Is that the way you kind of summarize this fight, Harry?
So I don't mind Prado having a round one like he has, right? Because he's a nightmare of a round one, constantly pushing the pace, constantly getting in the face, constantly trying to land massive, massive shots. But he's not cognizant enough that Zellhuber is just working the body and working the body and working the body. And we're in elevation and we're working the body, and he comes out in round two and he's bollocksed. So we cannot fight at the UFC level. We absolutely cannot have a game plan that is only one round long. You just can't do it.
And you especially can't do that at high altitude either as well.
Exactly. Even if we were in Vegas, right? Zellhuber may have taken 2 minutes more to get to the same position that he was in, right? But the prominence of the body kicks, the prominence of the low kicks, the prominence of the body hooks, and the prominence of those straight shots would have tired out Francisco Prado eventually. The damage that he was wearing midway through round 2 was just exhaustive, right? And when you get to that position and you're Francisco Prado, if that isn't the learning lesson that he needs to either invest in some straight shots or get to a position where he can keep a pace with the same style over 2.5 to 3 rounds, then he's going to have a significant problem staying in the UFC.
Yeah, look at the writing was on the wall midway through round 2. It was badly busted up. He was badly broken up. Went into the corner, Francisco Prado, at the end of round 2. Had his corner man flat out say to him, "You don't need your eyes. You don't need your eyes when you're in there." Did you hear that? What were you thinking? Did you? I know you look at these fights with the sound down sometimes.
I do, yeah. I did not watch. Sometimes with this crowd, because I saw on Twitter that the crowd was really good, I would sometimes watch some of the rounds with the crowd noise on, which unfortunately meant I had the commentary as well. But what I then did is mostly between rounds when I'm writing my notes up and stuff, I turn it off so I can focus on my notes. So I didn't hear that absolute gobshite tell a fighter that he doesn't need his eyes. What the fuck are we doing there? Like,
Yeah, if I was to break down exactly what was said here, I'm trying to find it here. He told his team that he couldn't see. His coach, Asim Zahadi, was then heard on camera saying, "You don't need your eyes. You don't need your eyes. Fight. Go to the center. Just fight. You don't need your eyes. If you fight in the clinch, you won't need your eyes. Do not fight in the center of the ring. In the center, you need your eyes. Get him to the fence, wrestle, clinch, fight him, so you don't rely on your eyes." And that's all he kept saying throughout the round. And look, at some things can be lost in translation, but in fairness, the UFC is fairly spot on when it does come in here. He did come out and kind of retort that today and saying that the translator unfortunately was not able to translate properly. But even half telling your fighter that you don't need your eyes, you absolutely need your eyes in a fight. And it was absolutely nonsensical. The fighter was looking for a way out at the end of round 2, and that's why he told his corner that he could not see out of his eyes, because he's too proud to pull the plug on it himself. Sometimes you need your team to save you. Sometimes you need the ref and the doctor to save you. Unfortunately, from Francisco Prado, nobody saved him, and he took more colossal damage coming in here in round 3 as well. Badly damaged eyes, badly cut up. And, it's a conversation we've had time and time again here, Harry. It's like, what stage do we have a little bit of common sense in there and give this man a chance to fight another day? He was down 2-0 heading into round 3, needed a knockout, didn't even look like he was slightly going to get it, looked like a duck out of water in there against Zellhuber. Obviously, with all the damage, it was harder to see as well. He was saying that he couldn't see. I mean, the writing was on the wall. The fight, in my opinion, probably should have been stopped in between. Not probably, I think it definitely should have been stopped in between rounds, and you would not have heard me complaining. Were you impressed with the level of performance that Zellhuber put on overall? I think there's nothing as glorious in my eyes as looking at a fighter that knows how to fight using his reach and using his length. And while Zellhuber isn't elite level status at doing that yet, he's definitely making some gains in there every time we see. And this was another solid performance. He basically brutalized Prado, who is, like you said, a dangerous guy who does start off very well. And Zellhuber didn't have it all his own way in round 1, but managed to come through that, managed to stick to his game plan as well, which, when some things aren't going your way, sometimes you can kind of get straight away from your game plan. But he stuck through, used these straight kicks, front kicks, use these straight punches, gets the job done. Who would you like to see him in there next with?
so I will just say on Francisco, on Daniel Zellhuber, I actually think he didn't finish Prado on purpose. It felt to me as I was watching it as though that was you've made your bed, now I'm going to make you lie in it type performance, which, if anything, makes me like Daniel Zellhuber even more. In terms of who I want for him next, I have to admit, I don't know. I haven't had a chance today to have a look at all of the people I want to see fight, but I I feel like who could we do at 155? Am I completely mental for saying I wouldn't mind Jim Miller, Daniel Zellhuber?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I see your Jim Miller and I raise you a Dan Hooker for a more maybe feasibly stylistic, better matchup against a striker who's not going to go in there and blow his wad in round one either. I think
True.
And I think, I don't with Jim Miller. I just don't want to see Jim Miller in that kind of fight. To be honest, I don't think it goes too well for him. I think Dan Hooker and Zellhuber will create a good fight at 155, and it's a good test. We get to see, if Zellhuber is willing to kind of make that jump up into the top 15, then with a win over Dan Hooker is going to kind of seal that deal for you, I feel. But
fair play. I think you're matchmaker today. Fair play to you.
And I don't. I just kind of threw that out with I don't know. I just kind of thought who's a good striker that's tough, that won't gas out, and just landed on Dan Hooker straight away. So let's go with that for now. Let's go with the next fight in the women's 115-pound division, and that it was Yazmin Jauregui who took out Sam Hughes in another bounce back, impressive performance in my eyes as well, Harry. This was a winnable fight for on paper. Another fight, that she might be disappointed she didn't get the finish, but Sam Hughes is a tough cookie, and I think she did everything in her power here and looked very, very good. I was really, really impressed by Jauregui's boxing in this. Her jab, her shot selection, the way she loaded up on her shots as well, but not all the time. I think we're looking at Francisco Prado and you're looking at Jauregui. Obviously, two different fighters, but what we were saying about Francisco Prado not kind of throwing everything but the kitchen sink in round one. What you have to do when you are wanting to showcase your power, when you know you have it, is showcase it in spurts throughout the fight. And I think that's what Jauregui did. And because of that, she maintained her gas tank. She didn't tire out, and she put on a very good performance, taking home the unanimous decision win over Sam Hughes.
Agreed. I think the thing that impressed me the most about Jauregui is her ability to land damage in all of the ranges. She was very dangerous coming out of the clinch. She has some really nice knees in the clinch. I was really impressed with the kicking game. I was impressed with how she would draw Sam Hughes onto shots. I was impressed at how she would land a one, take a step back, and then come back in with some shots to counter Sam Hughes's counters. That was all very, very, very impressive. My one note to Sam Hughes is I just wish she'd grappled a bit earlier, right? There just didn't seem to be enough motivation for her to grapple. And even after the sort of the first round and halfway through the second, when the stand-up was just not going well for her at all, there was just no sort of willingness to switch and change. And look, I understand that sometimes game plans are maybe we've worked really hard on our stand-up this camp and we want to go out and we want to really get those reps in, but you've got to fight to win at the end of the day, and even changing the levels enough to force Yazmin Jauregui to think, oh, fuck, okay, I've got to maybe switch up my range a little bit. I've got to think about my footwork a little bit more because takedowns are going to happen in this fight. There was none of that. And Sam Hughes just got outboxed. And I agree with you that for Yazmin Jauregui, it was a really, really good performance. Really, really, really nice performance. Really 100%.
Nice. Look, she was undefeated coming into this fight. Picked up a 20-second knockout loss over Denise Gomez. Came back obviously with a point to prove, and she looked good. She looked better. Who would you like to see her in there next? Now, that being said, I don't know whether you've had the chance to look at it. She's 24 years of age in the strawweight division. We don't need to be in any mad rush here with Jauregui, I don't think.
I have a name.
Go ahead.
What about Molly McCann?
Ooh, give me that. That is a great fight. Oh my goodness. Oh yes, that's made me raise up from my seat. I love that. That's a brilliant shout. I love it. No more. We need to see no more. When we're talking about what's next for Jauregui, let's give her Molly McCann. That's a fantastic fight. Let's move on to Manuel Torres versus Chris Duncan. Harry, really, really disappointing one here for Chris Duncan. Really, wasn't it?
Sure.
Like 1 minute 46 seconds into round one, gets taken down, rear naked choked by Manuel Torres, who put on a really great performance in front of his home crowd. But Duncan really kind of left this behind him. Not left it behind him, but like didn't really show any level of ability that he was going to win this fight at all from the start. Didn't get going, got taken down easily enough and got submitted easily enough. And he'll be very disappointed with this one, won't he?
He will, yeah. I mean, look, he just looked stiff as a board out there, really. And Manuel Torres didn't even take him down necessarily. He sort of dragged himself to the mat. And then the first turtle exchange was fine, but as he was getting up for the second turtle exchange, he just lifted his neck up way too much, and Torres was just waiting for him. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't clean. It wasn't sort of Torres didn't, as you say, he sort of Chris Duncan sort of took this fight away from himself in a lot of ways, and yeah, he definitely will be very, very disappointed with his performance here. Manuel Torres, I don't think we learned anything in this specific fight from him. We've learned that he can finish a rear naked choke. Fair play to him, but I'm going to need to see him against somebody else. I have a couple of names, but I'd like to see him against somebody else to sort of cement what we think about him. You know,
he's been on a really impressive run since 2018. Win or lose, that man has not been outside the first round, apart from one fight here that's showcasing here in 2019 that just has him winning. I don't know what the method was, but everyone, and since he's joined the UFC through Dana White's Contender Series, he's picked up first round knockout win over Frank Camacho, another one over Nicolas Mata with an elbow, this one by submission via rear naked choke in round one. This guy is a finisher, so we got to put him in there with someone who's going to be able to last the pace and bring him into that deeper waters. Harry, who do you think that guy is?
So it depends on what you want to do with him, right? If we want to push him quite quickly, then Joel Alvarez is the.
Oh, you read my mind. I love it. That was the one guy I was going to suggest. Joel Alvarez is. I think whether you are wanting to push him or whether you're not wanting to push him. He's 28 right now, so we're at the. Let's see if he can drive on, or let's see if he's not ready yet. And I think Joel Alvarez is the perfect guy for him. Who else did you have in mind?
Nasrat Haqparast.
Love that one too. Yeah. I think I prefer the Joel Alvarez one though.
Fair play.
Yeah. They're both similar enough kind of fighters as well. Both kind of sticky on the feet, have good power, has good.
Finish though.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. It'd be interesting. I think there's a good chance to see one or both of those fights are similar enough in around that for Manuel Torres, and it'll be interesting to see. He's definitely one person I have one eye on. But, I need to see a lot more against top competition for him to be rated, or for me to be confident that he is going to be a mainstay at the top 15 of the lightweight division. We move on to the prelim section of the card. Your guy, Cristian Quinonez, took on Ronnie Barcelos. Barcelos gets the win and gets the severe spotlight for the week as well, Harry. Talk me through this fight and why you chose Ronnie Barcelos as your severe spotlight this week.
So I chose Ronnie Barcelos this week because sometimes you see a veteran go in on a pretty downward spiral in his career, take a tough first round, and you say, "Oh, lads, this is not going to go well now, is it? This is just not going to go well." And then when he manages to turn himself around and he manages to get himself in there and he gets the fight to where he gets it to, and then he manages to finish it in the third, it's just a nice story. It's just a story that I think at times is one that we really need in MMA. And it's a story that tells us that regardless of whether age or size or whatever is obviously a factor, and it is something that we have to take very seriously. There are people like Ronnie Barcelos that if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. And I think that for the most part, that's the reason I picked him. Specifically in the fight, he looked terrible in the first round, just got pucked all over the place for a round. And then the second round manages to come out, not just looks effective in his grappling, but also does a great job at hurting Quinonez. And then third round comes out, gets right back to the grappling, finishes him with a lovely rear naked choke. And Quinonez deserved to lose the fight because when he hurt Ronnie Barcelos, his immediate reaction was grapple.
Grapple. Yeah, definitely. That doesn't that doesn't bode too well in the book of Mr. Harry Powell over there. Bad decision making was the story of the night. Do you have anyone for Barcelos? Do you care really at this stage? You're just happy to see him get the win and continue.
So again, if they want to throw him to the Wolves, then you give him Farid Basharat. If you don't, and you want to, like, just give him a fun fight or whatever, then I wouldn't mind seeing him fight, like, maybe the winner of Ayman Zahabi versus Javid. You could do the winner of Cameron Simon versus Peyton Talbot. You could do fucking John Castaneda if you wanted. Like, it's really tough for Hani Barcelos, who by the time he fights again will be 37 years of age.
You got to put him on that Brazilian card. You got to give him a chance to give him a crack in front of that Brazilian audience again. He deserves it after that. Fought behind enemy lines in Mexico against Quinonez. It's who I say the UFC were putting in a position to try and get the win. He'll be back. I mean, Quinonez is young enough. He's 27. I think Barcelos, he deserves that crack at the Brazilian, and give him any one of Harry's opponents there would do for me. We move on to Jesus Aguilar versus Mateus Mendonca. A very close fight, a split decision on the judges' scorecard. Not a close fight.
Such a close fight.
Oh yeah, such a close fight in this one, and very, very hard to call. The judges were split. I almost too close for me. I wasn't looking at it close enough to give it a legitimate scorecard myself, but a really good and enjoyable fight to watch, Harry.
Yeah, I had the same. Like, both guys were just so well matched in all areas of the fight. Both of them did some really, really nice grappling work. Both of them did some lovely, lovely striking, but nobody just took the fight from the other person. And that, yeah, I watched that. And at the end of it, I said 3 rounds have gone by and I can't tell you who's won. I have no idea. It was, really, really, really tough fight to score, but I enjoyed it for both men. Fair play to them.
Any shout for who you'd like Aguilar maybe to go on and face at 125?
It's tough, but could I, and maybe it's too early for this, but watching his style, I wouldn't mind Mr. Awkward MMA himself.
Mr. Awkward MMA himself at 125. Give me a guess. Tim Elliott?
There he is. There he is.
Oh, I love that. You see that, son?
Semi-finalist of the Severe MMA Mastermind right there.
There you go. Yeah, that would be a decent one. I'm all for that. We moved from 125 to 125. Edgar Chairez took out Daniel Lacerda by a triangle choke in round 1. You're shaking your head here. You're not surprised to see the result of this one at all, Harry.
Nah, it's rough enough. Like, it's rough enough. I don't know what to tell you. I called it. I don't know what to tell you. I called it. And
tell if anyone wasn't listening to the severe setup, tell everybody what you said last week.
I said Daniel Lacerda doesn't know how to win a fight without losing a fight. And Edgar Chairez loves jumping a gilly and then looking for stuff from close guard. And
boom, there you go. Gravy. I love it. Is there any takeaways at all from this one, apart from what you said on the setup last week?
Not really, no. I mean, Daniel Lacerda, I genuinely feel really sorry for him, because he has the athleticism and he has some of the makings of what could be a decent fighter. He just has such horrendous habits in so much of his fighting that it's just a real problem. And for Edgar Chairez, Joshua Van is next.
We have to say about Chairez, he missed weight by a lot in this fight. Came in, I think, 4 pounds, maybe 4 or 5 pounds, 6 pounds over. So I think we have to give Lacerda credit for taking the fight, number 1.
100%.
But yeah, we got to see Chairez make weight before he does anything else. And when you're missing by that much, it's telling me that you kind of probably need to make that move up the rankings as well. But we'll see what happens and what is next for him. As we move on to Faris Ziam versus Claudio Puelles, you gave Puelles a bit of shit, Harry, in this one for, a lack of fight IQ. I Yeah, he's just not that. Like, I was very impressed, I've got to say, with Faris Zaim's kind of leveling up in this fight and how comfortable he was in the grappling exchanges against a guy who's known for those leg locks as well. And probably found himself in a position where he wanted to be, or where he was grappling a little bit more than he probably would have liked, but did look relatively comfortable down there when he was going through the grappling exchanges with Puelles, who it's hard to fight a guy who wants nothing but those grappling exchanges and will look to pull guard and do all these awkward kind of techniques to get the fight down. But yeah, at the end of the day, just not good enough for Puelles, and a really good win for Faris Zaim, who took the fight by split decision, I believe. Yeah, I just want to check that.
So I just wanted to my thoughts on this one is I have no idea how you can score that a split decision. I thought that Faris Ziam won hands down. I didn't score a round to Claudio Puelles. Claudio Puelles, one thing I will say is Faris Ziam, he needs to figure out a way to actually stop the takedown. He did really, really well at getting back up. He did really, really well at countering. He did really, really well at transitioning and sweeping and these sorts of things. And even the takedowns he landed on Claudio Puelles were very, very nice. But the initial takedowns, we need to work on actually physically stuffing those. But that's something that will come with time and training. I scored all 3 rounds for Faris Ziam. I thought the damage on the feet was good. I thought his ability to land on the feet was good. I was impressed with Faris Ziam all around. In terms of what's next for him, this is never going to happen, ever. But my pick is Paddy Pimblett.
Yeah.
Because for Paddy Pimblett, you look at the holes of Faris Ziam being able to be taken down, and you say, well, I reckon Paddy Pimblett could probably take him down, And so there's a route to victory there for Paddy Pimblett. But in the same vein, Faris Ziam looks pretty good on the feet, strikes well. And again, that can cause Paddy Pimblett loads of problems. Other than that, I wouldn't mind Drew Dober, Faris Ziam.
Ooh, yeah, give me some of that. That's a bona fide banger alert right there. Yeah, I like that. I really do like that. I was impressed by Faris Zaim. I thought we saw some good improvements.
Agreed.
From a guy that was kind of labeled after getting that kind of demolished really by Terence McKinney, but he's since bounced back. Solid win over Mikhail Figlak, another solid win over Herbert, and another solid win over Claudio Puelles. And yeah, 26 years of age. He's definitely one to be keeping an eye on in the 155-pound division. Next up, Ronaldo Rodriguez took on Denise Bodnar. A rear naked choke win here for Ronaldo. Lazy by Rodriguez. Impressed by Rodriguez too in this fight, Ari, were you?
I was indeed. Dennis Bodner's no joke. Like
No, he's not.
He's a solid fighter, and yeah, I was very, very, very impressed to finish him as well. Yeah, that was cool. That was really, really good to see.
And Denise is like coming in here, and he's lost his last 3 in a row. But like he's kind of like who did we lay? Is it Shane Ross or Shannon Ross that we were saying? His record doesn't really showcase his level of ability, and I think the same can be said here about Denise Bodnar, who looks to have a lot of capabilities of being a good fighter, but hasn't got the run of luck here and things. It seems to me like a guy who enjoys being the hammer but doesn't enjoy being the nail, and when his back is against the wall a little bit, he can kind of find himself in some precarious positions as well. Now, last 2 fights, one was a submission to Malcolm Gordon, the other one was a technical decision loss, and obviously Rodriguez kind of saw some of the holes in his grappling game and kind of took advantage of them, securing the rear naked choke in round 2 in this fight as well. How high are you on Ronaldo Rodriguez based off what you did see? Obviously, we're going to see a lot tougher tests for him down the line, but 16-2 right now, 24 years of age, a crazy record for a 24-year-old man. He's got the world at his feet here now. What do we do with him, Harry?
Rafael Estevam is what we do with him.
Why do you like that fight?
He is a scrapper. He can grapple everywhere. He can do a bit of the striking. I don't usually do this, but I think because Rodriguez is so young and he has an ability to bounce back from like an early prospect versus prospect type matchup, I think if we have a look at that fight and see how that fight goes down, it gives us a better idea of where Rodriguez and or Esteban is going to be placed. Esteban obviously went out and beat Charles Johnson in his last fight, even though he missed weight, so that needs to be fixed. But I like both of their styles, and I think they would meld together quite nicely.
Absolutely. Another two guys that showcased some really good styles as well, Harry, was Felipe de Santos and Victor Altamirano. A lot of controversy surrounding this fight. A lot of people thought Altamirano got the win. I'm going to hold my hand straight up here and say that I did not get to catch this fight. Cannot give my opinion on the scorecards, but there was a lot of hustle and bustle online about the scoring of this fight. A lot of people did think that Altamirano did do enough to win. It was Felipe dos Santos that got the win in the fight itself. When we're looking at the scorecards, if we were to bring them up, if everyone bears with me for just a second, and we'll get that up right now. The judges scored the fight, Harry. 30-27 to Altamirano, 29-28 to De Santos, and 29-28 to De Santos as well. I think the big controversy came off of Miguel Jimenez's 30-27 card in what was perceivably 3 close rounds. Any quick thoughts on this one?
I watched the fight. I got so engrossed in how close it was, I forgot to take notes. The only, literally the only note I have is "fuck me, that first round is close, isn't it?" That's all I took. So that tells you how close of a fight it was. Both guys looked good. I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch in 3 or 4 years. I think that would be grand to see where the fighters pushed on. But yeah, really, really good fight. Really enjoyed it.
When it comes to the controversy here, what I will say is Judge Mike Bell and Judge Yonchiro Camacho both had this fight exactly the same, which I feel does pay dividends on the result of this fight as well. Not too familiar with Mr. Miguel Jimenez, and it's a name I don't really recognize. You recognize his name? No. So anyway, Felipe de Santos wins by split decision. At 145 in the opening fight, Harry, Mohamed Naimov, Eric Silva, a very good fight on paper. Just unfortunate ending. Eric Silva hurt his knee in that fight. What did you take from the fight before the injury happened, Harry?
Nothing. Basically, nothing happened. I wouldn't mind running that back immediately, so long as Eric Silva is healthy and available to do so. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. Yeah, I really wouldn't mind seeing that fight again. Good matchup on paper.
La Riba, that's it. That wraps us up for UFC Mexico City balance breakdown card. A strange card, lots of talking points. We went a little bit over than what we were expecting, but when we do have a couple of these kind of cards, I think I'm happy to share the time on it. These cards do add that little bit extra when you have that rapturous crowd. You have the crowd fighting for their home fighters. It just adds a little bit extra. Not the same quite excitement, unfortunately, next weekend where we're headed back to the UFC Apex. We'll be back on Thursday with the severe setup. We're going to take a couple of fights and look at them ahead of time. Obviously, with Moreno and Royval, we do have Mohamed Mohayev and Alex Perez, and we'll have a few thoughts around that fight too, I'm sure. Until then, over there and head out to severemma.com. Check out the Severe Spotlight on oh my god, his name is Juan Barcelos. Follow Harry Powell at BJJ_Harry Powell and myself at O'Neill MMA. Take care, like, share, tell a friend. We'll talk to you soon.